Memphis wrestling legend. He's a wrestler, he's a promoter, he's an author, he's a businessman. He was even once a referee and a ticket taker. He is the founder of TNA Wrestling. He is Mr. Jerry Jarrett. Jarrett, welcome to Two-Man Power Trip of Wrestling.
Well, glad to be here. With that introduction, I'm not sure I can follow it.
Well, you know what's so interesting about you and your family? I mean, obviously you guys have been in the wrestling business for a very, very long time, but one thing I was so interested in was, how did you actually get started in the wrestling business? Because, I mean, your mother was even a part of the business.
Yes, I was what you might say born in the business. My mother took a job for the local promoter in Nashville, Nick Goulas, Roy Welch. And I was 3 years old, and when she took the job and would literally sit at her feet while she sold tickets to the wrestling match. So I started out then when I got 8 or 9 years old. They let me start selling the programs. About 12, I got a promotion and was able to take up tickets on the front door, and then I started promoting spot shows at about 15 and then got into the business.
It's interesting. I guess you went from promoter to wrestler, then back again to a promoter. But how did you get into the actual wrestling involvement of the business? Where did you train, and when did you start? Really, I know it was a little bit after you started promoting, but when did you actually start the thick of things with your training?
Yeah, well, I promoted basically while I was in high school every summer from the time I was 15, 16, 17. And then I got away from the wrestling while I was in college. And then I decided I didn't like the corporate world after I was working. And went up and asked the promoter for a part-time job until I found out what I wanted to do. And I never left the part-time job. One day the referee he was involved in an auto accident, so they were desperate and had me go out and buy a referee shirt and send me to a town to referee the match. Then from riding to the town, they would get me a ride with different wrestlers. Japanese wrestler Tojo Yamamoto one day suggested, why don't you let me train you? Because, we would talk about sports, and I just loved sports and played all four major sports in high school. Got a scholarship to Washington State Teachers College for basketball. So he started training me, and I went refereeing to wrestling. And then I figured out that money was in the promotion, so I went back to promoting.
What was it like training under Tojo Yamamoto? Because he's a big-time legend, especially in the Memphis area.
Yeah, well, he was tough on me like he was all the rest of it. My mother did not want me to be in the wrestling business. So she said before, this is after Tojo taught me how to work. And so when I came up, Tojo was trying to get Nick to book me. My mother, who then had worked up from a ticket seller to their secretary, she intervened and said, "No, until you can defend yourself, I don't want you in the ring." there will be a jealousy factor because you're kind of in the business, in the office. So she lined up an old shooter by the name of Sailor Moran. And I didn't find it out until later that her instructions to Sailor were discourage him so that he doesn't want to be arrested. And literally for about 9 months, Sailor would just take me and beat me up pretty severely. But by that time, Tojo was telling me, now they're going to try to make you not want to be in the business. I know what the deal is. You don't need to really be learning to shoot. And so I stuck it out. Finally, Sailor said, you know, I'm feeling sorry for you. I never thought I'd be that way, but I can't beat you up anymore. So he intervened and went to the office. Told him I was a whole lot tougher than I really was.
Now, when you actually started wrestling, getting involved, obviously Memphis was a huge area, you know, of great wrestling, and obviously you have played a huge part in the history of Memphis wrestling. But what was it like wrestling in the Memphis area, and what were the fans like?
Oh, in Memphis and really all over, Louisville, Evansville, the whole southeast here. And later I found out when I promoted Jim Barnett in Atlanta and had an interest in Florida. The whole southeast had very, very passionate fans. And, you know, it was exciting. When I first went to Memphis, it wasn't growing very well. And we'd go down, and I was on a preliminary match, and they'd pay me $15 or $25 was a big pay. But, you know, I had some real good luck when my break came, and the town picked up. We went to throwing the sellout crowds.
Now, in your wrestling career, I'm not sure what the date was, but I know you had a scaffold match, probably the first of its kind. Do you remember that scaffold match, and what year, and who else was involved in like that crazy scaffold match?
I don't remember the exact time, but when I would get in from the towns, I was so hyped up I would turn on the TV and maybe I'd get home at 1 and watch television till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And I saw a movie that was a real B movie. I'd been a C-movie. Really poorly done, bad actors. But in this movie, the one part that had me set up for laying down and intently watching was 2 like gladiators or warriors in Roman times. The good guy and the bad guy were in a fight. And they fought out on a tree that had fallen across a big gorge. Of course, logic tells you there wasn't any tree tall enough for this gorge. But you know, in Hollywood, you could take some liberties. So anyway, I was watching it, and I thought, boy, that is exciting. I think people would love to see wrestlers fight over that gorge. Well, you can't have a gorge in the ring. So I did the best I could, and I set up scaffolding on each side of the ring and put a walkboard across it. And I was finally able to talk to a wrestler named Don Green in the Wrestling Against Me. That was a scaffold match. First one took place in Louisville, Kentucky.
Quite a crazy match and quite a crazy idea. It's funny how how it all came about. That's kind of cool. And obviously, in your career, you had a lot of great moments in Memphis, but your name kind of goes hand in hand and very synonymous with another Memphis wrestling legend, and that is Jerry the King Lawler, the King of Memphis, Tennessee. How did that relationship start out? How did you and Mr. Lawler get together?
Jackie Fargo, who was a big star at that time, but it was me and Toto and Fargo were the box office attractions. And Jackie said, I've got a guy that's a heck of an artist. He's just a kid. Would you mind letting him bring his artwork on? He draws pictures of me and other wrestlers, and let Lance look at him, and give him a little exposure. So I said, sure. So we had Jarrett come down to the TV station, and Lance showed his artwork. Then the next time Jackson came to me, he said, Lawler has been wrestling for these outlaw groups, little towns over in Arkansas, and I went to one of them, and I think he could be a good talent. Whether you let him wrestle on Memphis TV, carpenter, job man, whatever you want to call it. I said, okay. So we brought him to Memphis TV, and he was nervous and scared, and chewing gum 900 miles an hour, and then would grin and everything that happened. And it was a nervous grin. So after the match, I told him, get the hell out of here and don't ever come back. Because he did everything. He did everything you can do wrong. Grinning in the ring when he's getting his brains beat out, chewing gum. So I ran him off. Then Fargo appealed 2 or 3 weeks later, and Jerry came back, and I guess his nerves had settled down, but took great bumps, had a natural feel for the business, and so I started booking him as enhancement talent, And then I saw the potential in him and put him with a veteran, Jim White, and a manager, Sam Bass, and that's how he broke into the wrestling as a box office attraction. And then, of course, he turned out to be the best wrestler I ever promoted. He could talk, he could make great interviews, he had great timing in the ring, and he took crazy, exciting bumps that made the people stand up. Then, as time went on, I made him my partner, and I kept giving him a little more till we ended up 50-50 partners.
And obviously, like you mentioned, Jerry's maybe the greatest wrestler, or one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. But to really what put him on the map was a feud that you booked, obviously, was him versus Jackie Fargo. Do you think that feud really got him over and made him cement his spot as one of the top guys in Memphis?
Yeah, because see, Jackie kind of discovered. So Jackie told me, I'd like to pass the torch on to Lawler. And yes, they had a great program, and that really established him as a superstar in Memphis. Jerry got national acclaim with the program with the comedian Andy Kaufman. Taylor is the one, Jack Fargo is the one that kind of groomed him to be the king of Memphis.
And he would become, the legendary king of Memphis. But there was another king, if you will, that, had a residence in the Memphis area, and that was Elvis Presley. Is that true that he used to actually go to the wrestling shows? But, they would hide him kind of off to the side. Is it true that Elvis was actually there?
Oh, yeah. When I first started, we didn't run at the Mid-South Coliseum. I moved there. We were in Ellis Auditorium, downtown Memphis. And Elvis was a huge, huge fan. And one of his staff was a guy named Red. He came to me and said, Elvis loves to watch y'all wrestle, and he'd like to come to live matches. So the Ellis Auditorium is one of those arenas that had the big arena and then the stage. And the other side of the stage was like a theater stage or auditorium. So we were able to black out that side and let Elvis sit over there and look through the stage and see the ring and watch the matches. He came 3 or 4 times.
Wow, it's great. The King watching the King. That's unbelievable. Obviously, Elvis is one of the biggest stars of all time, and it's awesome that he's sitting in watching some wrestling. That's unbelievable. Now, with CW...
I'm sorry?
Oh, I'm sorry. I cut you off. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Lawler named himself the King. One day he and I were in a conversation, and, they called Elvis the King. A news thing was talking about the King, and Jerry said, hell, I don't know why they call him the King. I've sold out the Mid-South Coliseum 100 times more than he has. He said, I'm the real King. And I said, that's a good idea. You ought to tell Lance Saturday, I'm the real King of Memphis. So he did. And,
yeah, that's awesome. With you and Lawler, obviously the CWA in Memphis became huge, and if you were anybody in the business, you went through Memphis. Hulk Hogan, Jesse Ventura, I believe even Lou Thesz made an appearance. Jimmy Valiant, the Fabulous Ones, Bam Bam Bigelow, Jimmy Hart, Cornette, Kamala, Paul Heyman spent some time there. Anybody who was everybody went down there. But one guy that really, really sticks out to me, because it's funny because obviously he's an actor and a comedian, was Andy Kaufman. What was it like booking Andy Kaufman and his feud with Jerry the King Lawler?
Well, I was Andy's last. I talked to him, and he'd called Vern Gagne, he'd called New York office Vince, and he just said, I would like to be a wrestler. And I said, I watch you on Texas. You're not a wrestler. You don't even look like quick enough to keep from getting hurt. He said, well, in my nightclub act, I wrestle women. I'm the intergender champion of the world. And I said, Andy, you're crazy. He said, no. He said, I really think I can beat anyone. And I said, well, we got some women down here in Memphis you can't beat. And he said, I'll put up $5,000 of my own money that I can beat any woman alive. Well, that was too good to pass up, so I said, come on in. And so he had 2 or 3 matches, and he was really just natural, made great interviews. Then one night there was a woman that was about to win his $5,000. So Jerry and I were at the back, and I said, Jerry, run to the ring and stop that match before that woman beats you. And Andy has to give him $5,000. So he did, and then Andy just played it by ear. I'm going to sue you. You're interfering in my match. And then we did the program with him and Lawler. That got a lot of national attention.
Feud is just unbelievable. The promos back and forth and the angles and the pile driver and the broken neck and obviously David Letterman and everything else in between. But another feud that really, really sticks out, and it was kind of ballsy of you guys to go with it, was when Randy Savage and the Papos kind of invaded from ICW, and they feuded with mostly Jerry the King Lawler, but they kind of ran rampant all over Memphis. What was it like having Lawler feud with Savage and kind of have Savage be like almost like an unpredictable wild card?
Jarrett is best friends and was one of the great losses when he died in my life. And I'll tell you why. Randy and his family decided they wanted to be in the promotion business. So they picked Kentucky as the place to promote. Well, they got on TV and they spent all of their time knocking Lawler and Dundee in my promotion. And of course, to the wrestling fan, they thought that was just part of the act, and those people were, the heels always knock the big face, and vice versa. So finally, after they lost all their money, Randy called me and he said, "Jerry, you've been a real gentleman in this wrestling war, and I want you to know that it was not personal, it was all business. And I really respect you. We're folding up our tent and going home." So I said, "Randy, I appreciate the call." I said, "Why don't we make some money out of it?" And he said, "You'd work with me after all the stuff I've said and done?" I said, "Sure." Because he broke Dundee's jaw, crazy stuff. So I said, "Look, why don't we not tell anybody except you and I know it? You don't tell the rest of your company, and I don't tell any of my men. You just show up at Memphis TV with a big banner saying our whole promotion's cowards. You whip everybody in here." And so they did, and after they were there and I saw the reaction, I told Lawler, I whispered in his ear and said, "It's all a big work, Jerry. Go out and challenge him." So Jerry went out and said, "You're not going to come into my backyard," yada, yada, yada. Then we booked it and drew sellouts for several months everywhere. Then Randy is the only person that came to me. All of Vince recruited all of our good talent. But Randy came to me and said, "Jerry, Vince has called. I will work out as long as you want me to here before I go, because you've been straight with me, I'll be straight with you." All the rest of them just disappeared, but not Randy Savage. And I've just always had the greatest respect for him and his family. Lanny's a great guy. His daddy was a great guy. I never knew his mother, but I'm sure she was a great lady.
Yeah, definitely. It was a shame we lost him too soon. And obviously that feud with him and Jerry Lawler, it's one of those feuds you go back and you watch, and you think it's real, first of all, and then secondly, you watch the matches, and just unbelievable, the amount of heat that they get, and just the physicality in the matches were great. You really, really thought that Macho Man was a loose cannon, that he was really nuts.
Oh, yeah. Well, I had the pleasure of handling Randy's matches when he was down here in Memphis working for us. And then he was in New York when I went up to help Vince. during that steroid problem, and I got to handle Randy's match, WrestleMania 10, which was at Madison Square Garden. So mine and Randy's life were really intertwined.
That's funny. I was there that night as well. Great night. Great WrestleMania. Awesome. But like you mentioned, with you being brought up to the WWF in 1993, obviously with Vince McMahon on trial for the steroids, how did that actually all come about?
Oh, Vince became my Sunday telephone buddy. He would call me every Sunday, and we would talk for literally sometimes 2 hours. And he knew that I was very close to his father. So it was a bad time. All the bad publicity about Pat Patterson was out. Right on the heels of that came the government charging him with steroid distribution. And so he would call, and I think, Vince doesn't do anything by accident. He's a brilliant man. But because I was so close to his dad, he finally told me one day, he said, I'm really worried if I have to go to jail. I've got great people, but nobody knows how to tie all the pieces in the wrestling business together. Is there any way I can talk you into coming up here? Of course, I said no. Then, 4 or 5 Sundays later, I said yes.
Wow. So basically, you would have been in charge of the whole company. You would have been the boss. You would have been the Vince McMahon.
Yes. When I first went up there, that was Vince's intent. And thank the Lord, he. And I don't mean this. I hope you don't take offense to it, but if you've ever lived in Tennessee and then you go to the Northeast, it's not fun. So when he was, I used to laugh and joke with Vince, and I said, Vince, don't ever take a vacation to the Southeast, because you'll move Titan Towers to Nashville, Tennessee. But at any rate, 2 or 3 days after he was inaugurated, and because if you've grown up in the South, Vince had a house that probably cost him $7 or $8 million there in Greenwich at the Polo Grounds. And I told him, I said, I can put your house in my ballroom. You just think you're living a good life up here. But anyway, we used to have a lot of fun joking.
What was your relationship like after, obviously the trial, ended the way it did, and he didn't end up going to jail. But what was your relationship like after that? Did he still call you every Sunday? Were you guys still in communication? Were you still talking?
Not as much, of course, but I helped Vince a good bit. First thing that happened, Eric Bischoff came when he heard I'd come back home to New York and offered me a job, help him run Atlanta, the Turner. And I knew Ted personally from years ago when I was in Atlanta with Jim Barnett. But I had burned out from leaving home. I wanted to stay right there in Henderson. But finally, Eric offered me a job as a consultant, said I would never have to come to Atlanta, just talk on the phone. So And I told him, you know, I feel obligated to Vince. Vince was still paying me. Vince paid me a year after I came home. Because I think he thought I'd come back up there, but he consultant at home. And I said, I certainly don't want to go to work for them because it offends you. He said, they'll take their money. The sooner they go broke, the better off I'll be. And I said, well, that's not speaking very highly of me. He said, they won't listen to you anyway. I know them. So anyway, I accepted the job. And so for about a year, I was getting a check in the mailbox from WWE and one from Ted Jarrett. WCW. And, but after about a year with WCW, I got tired of it. But Vince, sometimes Lynn would call and I would work as liaison to some of the wrestlers. Like when he got the Stanners, I called Scott. When we got Hogan, I arranged for them to meet in the hotel when Hogan came back for him. Stuff like that. But, you know, I got away from wrestling and I haven't talked to Vince in a while.
Now,
wait, yes I did.
Oh.
I called him when I got the Russian kid.
Vladimir Kozlov.
Yeah. Anyway, a friend of mine, Lenny Cochran, up there in Brighton Beach, asked me about getting in the business, and I called Vince and asked him if he'd give him a contract, and he said, sure.
Now, what was the deal with Vladimir Kozlov?
With who?
With Vladimir Kozlov, with you bringing him in, yeah.
Yeah, what I wanted to do, and I told Vince, I said, you know, the kid needs some training. And I said, you don't have anybody up here that has a clue how to break a wrestler in. Let me let him move to Nashville, New York, and let me work with him for a while. And he said, no, we'll break him in. Of course, they didn't, and then they miscast him, and he didn't last long.
No, he didn't. He should have lasted longer. I actually liked Vladimir Kozlov a lot, but you know they didn't use him correctly, and they didn't really put him in the best situation. But did you get heat with TNA? Because obviously, you know, you were with TNA right before that, and then, you know, I believe it's around 2005-ish, and, you know, you're bringing the guys to Vince and WWF. Did you have any heat with, with Jeff and TNA at that point?
Yeah, I called Jeff because I wasn't real active in TNA at that time. I thought they were going the wrong direction, and I didn't want to fight with Jeff and Dixie. And so I was staying at home. So I called Jeff and I said, talk to Dixie and see if they'll book this kid. I said, I started Hogan out, and this guy's got more natural talent than Hogan did, and I think he can be that big a star. So Jeff said, yeah, I'll talk to her and see. So Dixie declined. And so in my phone conversation with Jeff, I said, well, I don't want to disappoint my friends. First of all, they're all billionaires, and I may want to get back in the wrestling business someday. So, do you care if I call Vince? And Jeff laughed because Jeff and Vince won't get along at all. So Jeff laughed and said, yeah, go ahead and call him. Because Jeff is thinking there's linkage between Vince not liking him and not liking me. You know, he just didn't know. So when I called Vince said, sure. And then after they took him and word got out that I sent, his name was Ole Previous, was his real name. And, you know, then Bob Carter and Dixie and Jeff all got bent out of joint, and I was able to safely make my escape from wrestling.
What was the heat between Jeff and Vince? I mean, you said they don't get along. Was it all because of basically an incident where supposedly he was holding him up for money, but he wasn't really holding him up. He was just basically getting what was due to him. Was that the heat between them? Vince thought one way and Jeff thought the other?
Yeah, I've been asked about that a lot, and that's one of the areas, Jeff's my son, and that's one of the areas that I just declined to make comments on.
Yeah,
Other than that, what?
We spoke to Jeff about it. He was basically saying it was a little bit of a miscommunication on like everyone's part, where he was basically just trying to get the money that was owed to him, and I guess Vince took it a different way.
Like I said, that's one of the things that I say no comment about. And I think you can understand that.
Yep. Now, as we're talking about TNA, how did you and Jeff actually start NWA TNA? I mean, it was in 2002. WCW was dead. ECW was dead. WWF was the only game in town. They would soon become the WWE. How did you and Jeff start NWA TNA?
Jeff had burned his bridges with Vince. You know, the famous Vince. The heat was so intense that Vince fired him on national television. I don't know if you saw that or not. But yeah. He said, JARRETT, you are fired. If only it was for real. But anyway, Jeff, there really wasn't any options. So at the time I had a big construction company going, and I tried to get Jeff to just walk away from wrestling and join us in the construction business. And as Trip, I had Jeff get his general contracting license. But Jeff was hell-bent on continuing wrestling. So he kept coming to see me, and finally I relented. We started the company.
Now, when you originally started, obviously with a different concept, you guys were going with just pay-per-view programming in the beginning, and it was just new content every Wednesday night, and you guys would have the pay-per-view. But did you foresee you guys starting at pay-per-view and then going to TV, or how did you want to where did you see the company ending up?
Well, Jeff's the one that, I think Bob Ryder was a great influence on me. They're the ones that had the concept of going straight to pay-per-view at a very cheap price. And I didn't know. I said, well, we can try it. But our hope was that we would eventually end up on network TV. And through a very long route, TNA did. Started on Fox and then moved to Spike. And it was one of those situations where, you know, you love your children and you'll do a lot of things sometimes that don't make sense for your children. And my heart was not in wrestling since 99 when I sold my interest in Memphis alone. Because, you know, I had moved on. And, you know, when you enjoy something, you can be successful in it. When you quit enjoying it, you don't need to do it. And my partner that's in the car with me right now, we're coming back from an interview. We're in the healthcare business. And that is doing incredibly well, and we all love it, and I have the same passion for that as I used to have in 1970 for wrestling. But I never had the eye of the tiger for the TNA or any wrestling. After 99. But I don't really know when it was. But it culminated in 1999.
Right. Now, recently you and Jeff have reconciled. He got the TNA Hall of Fame and everything else. But was the heat between you guys because you didn't really have interest in TNA and that was his passion? Was that the heat between you guys?
I think that, yes. The problem was the wrestling business. And Jeff didn't want me to get out of the business. And he really didn't want me in. You know, when a son grows up in the shadow of their father, they want to break out of that shadow. But then, on the one hand, on the other hand, they really don't want that big shadow to go away. So that was the struggle that we had. And then TNA kind of magnified it to the point that we went several years and didn't talk to each other. And then, you know, Jeff sent me an email and we exchanged emails for a few weeks, and then we had a meeting, and, you know, now back to a father and son relationship.
Very good. Very, very good to hear. With TNA, obviously, with Jeff, was it a hard decision trying to find somebody? Because obviously TNA sold a portion of the company when you were there to Panda Energy and Dixie Carter and Bob Carter. But was it hard to find a suitor? And did you think that the Carters were like the right financial backers for TNA wrestling at that time?
Well, it was hard, and yet it wasn't. There, you know, the wrestling business is very levels, and there is a tremendous amount of wealth in this country. And so, you know, Dixie is the one that wanted to be in the wrestling business. And when Jeff and I flew out to Dallas and met with her mother and father and some of the board members of Panda Energy, Dixie was a great influence in having a interest in the company. And, you know, it was a blessing and a curse. I think that it would have been a good thing had Panda Energy had stayed at an arm's length investor professor. Because Dixie really didn't have the background to step in and run the business. So it all became a situation that I wanted to escape from. And I was divorced from Jeff's mother. And so every time I would talk to him about me getting out, it was kind of, are you going to abandon me again? So I was real unhappy for a long time. And, I think that was a big part of why Jeff and I went through our period of separation. But everything's good now.
Yes, it's very, very good to hear, and very good that Jeff is finally honored by Dixie and TNA, as he's finally a member of the TNA Hall of Fame, as he should always be. Now, if I could rewind just a little bit back, we were talking about yourself and your relationship with Vince McMahon, but I was very curious about when you and Jerry Lawler started the USWA. Obviously, you had the CWA, and then you guys started the USWA together. But what was the relationship with Vince McMahon and the WWF? Because it seemed like they were using a lot of your talent, and you guys were using a lot of WWF talent. You even had a feud for a little bit, the USWA versus the WWF.
Well, that was a situation where Lawler would go on TV, and I would ask him not to. He had such angst in him about Vince taking all the talent. But, you see, you have to go way back in history. I had an ESPN contract. And because I was from the old National Wrestling Alliance and the old school, when Jim Barnett and Jim Crockett Sr. came to me and said, "You're going to kill wrestling," when ESPN sees everything you're doing in Dallas and Memphis, then the whole world sees it. And so I said, okay, I'll pull up my horns in. So when Vince made his move, I always knew that it was inevitable because of the advent of cable TV. So I wasn't as angry at Vince as Jerry was, because, it's kind of like if you're Reed Hardware in Hendersonville and you get mad and blow because they're putting all the little hardware stores out. There's some things in life that are inevitable. They're just going to take place. And cable TV was going to kill regional wrestling. Couldn't help not to. Somebody is going to have a national television show. And Vince saw this and did it. Because he went from the old school that his father was from.
What was the...
Does that make any sense?
Yep, absolutely, definitely. What was the relationship with USWA and WWF, though, as far as, was there like a talent exchange that you guys had with them?
Yeah. Again, Vince called and said, you guys are the last one standing. I watch your tapes, you know what you're doing. Why don't we compensate you a little bit and you let us send you some talent and you train them down there. I said, okay. Because he really wasn't killing us. It hurt us, but I wasn't making $1 million a year, $700,000. Hell, you can't spend $700,000 So I was never angry at WWE for their expansion. And we also, in a way, it helped us because every time he took a talent, it would give someone underneath talent a chance to move up to main event. And, and the crowds would sometimes pick up because of the new talent. Of course, ultimately it ran out because we ran out of new talent, or good talent. Kind of like American Idol. So hot, now their top talent's not as good as it was 5 or 6 years ago, so they're not getting the ratings that they did.
Good point. And with the USWA versus WF feud, I don't know if a lot of people realize this, but they should go back and watch a lot of, when you guys had the interpromotional feud, because that's the first time we got a glimpse at the heel character of Mr. McMahon. Do you remember him basically playing the heel on USWA TV?
Oh, yeah. See, I was in New York promoting when that happened. And we were sitting at his dining room table, Chris Pritchard, Pat Madison, me, and Vince. And we were talking about the need for a new talent. And kind of off the cuff, in a half-joking way and half very serious way, I said, hell, Vince, you ought to get in the ring. You're the best natural heel I've ever known. Looked at me and he said, are you kidding? Or I said, yeah, about 50-50. I said, you are a natural heel. If you had decided to wrestle instead of promote, I would have had you as my superstar in Memphis. So we laughed it off, Then he came to me one day. We were doing one of the secondary shows over the studio. And he said, I've always had a secret desire to get in the ring. And I said, well, let me tell you what we got. I'll take you to Memphis. We'll start out here making interviews. And I'll take you to Memphis and you can get some experience under your belt. And I guarantee you you'll be the best talent WWE's ever had. And that's how that all got started.
Did he ever do any actual training with you at all down there, or no?
Any what?
Did he do any actual, like wrestling training with you at all down there?
Well, yeah, he had one. He had some matches.
I'm sorry. He actually did some wrestling.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly because I'm had my plate full in New York, and then I'm trying to halfway oversee Memphis. I was really busy there those years, or months. And I think we did a deal with him in Law 1 or 2, maybe 3 Mondays. But he got tremendous heat with interviews before he ever showed up.
Yes, I remember those interviews well. Very, very funny stuff. Very good heel stuff. But if I could, I actually forgot or skipped over this earlier, but in Memphis, obviously, there was a huge feud, the 1987 Feud of the Year, and I was just wondering your take on it, because we've had Austin Idol on the show a couple times, and he does nothing but have good things to say about you and good things to say about Jerry Lawler. But do you remember the feud between Austin Idol and Jerry Lawler that was basically one of the greatest feuds in the history of Memphis?
Yes. In a very general way, yes, I remember. Specifics, no, after, what was it, 40 years, a lot of it all runs together. It's like, right now, when you mention USWA, reason USWA came into being was Kerry and Kevin Von Erich called me and said, we're broke and filed for bankruptcy, and I hate to see my daddy's territory close up. Would you be interested in coming out? And I did, and saw the potential, but I had to have a new banner. I didn't want to be WCCW, which is what they were, world class.
What was the relationship like between Memphis and World Class? Was it hard to, like you were just talking about it, but was it hard to come up with ideas? Obviously, Jerry had a great match with Kerry Von Erich that I remember quite fondly. But was it hard to get together with, obviously going out of business, but, creatively, was it hard to deal with them?
With Dallas?
Yeah.
No, it wasn't hard. I had controlling interest.
Oh, you had controlling interest. Okay, gotcha. Yes. Okay.
I had...
Also, you... Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, also you had, the Von Erichs coming to Memphis and back and forth a lot. But was that profitable for you guys to for you to do that?
Was it what?
Profitable. Was that like a good business decision by you guys?
Oh yeah. I had a tour bus. We would do Dallas on Friday night and Memphis TV Saturday morning. All of us. That's where we broke Steve Austin in. Chris Adams was the trainer at my wrestling school, and Steve was one of the students. And Chris was very fond of him, thought he was a good talent. So we stuck him, we put him on the bus and took him to Memphis, where he could wrestle every night. Because Dallas didn't run very often. I mean, Dallas itself, the territory, didn't run very much.
Did you foresee...
Boys get experience. What?
Did you foresee Austin, at that point, obviously, you saw something in him. He was talented, and obviously he'd become the biggest star, one of the biggest stars of all time. But did you foresee him at that point being, a huge star like he became?
No, I didn't. Chris Adams did. No, I just, he was just one of the boys. But of course, that's when he first got in. I mean, when somebody's having first match for you and the second they're in, you don't always see that they're going to be stars. Ultimate Warrior turned out to be a superstar, and Sting turned out to be a superstar. But then when I broke them into the business and they were the Blade Brothers, they wasn't the same people as Ultimate Warrior and Sting.
With Warrior and Sting, did you see potential in them when you got them, or did you just think that man, I could mold these two guys into being something great?
No, when they showed up at my house in Hendersonville, I saw two good-looking bodies that had unbelievable passion to break into this business. And so that made it worth my time to break them in. Did I think they would ever rise to the level they did? No. But things truth I didn't think about.
Yeah, I mean, Sting gives you a ton of credit. Basically says, you know, you're basically the guy that gave him his first break, started him out really for real in the wrestling business, and you know, he gives you a lot of credit. And I guess you must have saw something, in him. Obviously the passion, but you must have saw something in him to give him that chance.
Well, sure. What I'm saying is, I saw that they merited my time and energy to break into the business. But did I foresee that Sting would become the greatest wrestler WCW ever had? No. I didn't. I just thought he would. I thought he would make it the business. Now, this is after I had told them both, look, you guys are never going to be main event in Memphis because you broke in here. My advice to both of you is to go back home to California and get a good job. So, when you're asking these questions, yes, I saw enough potential to break them in. Did I think they were going to become big box office superstars? No. Now, after they went to 2 or 3 other territories, and each stop along the way, they improved their character and their ability. Sure. But, it's hard to look into a glass ball and see any more than these guys there breaking it with.
Very, very true. No doubt about that. And it's funny because you obviously know what you're doing, because maybe you don't see them becoming huge stars, but you knew that Sting and Warrior were going to be something in the business, Austin, and then of course even look back to your old, your business partner in Jerry the King Lawler, who you gave your break to. So obviously you know what you're doing, and you see something in these guys, and obviously you can maximize a lot of their potential.
Well, yeah, like when Hogan came to me. Hogan wasn't then, and he isn't now, or any stop in between, or right after. He's very limited as far as just wrestling. But what I saw in him was the same charisma that made him one of the top box office of all time. And so, some people, some of the talent exude charisma before they can wrestle. Jerry Lawler did. Jimmy Hart did. Jim Cornette did. Hulk Hogan did. Coco Beware of the Birdman. Certainly Randy Savage. But some, it takes a while for them to develop before it to come out. And if you will think about the two, Ultimate Warrior made the best interview I ever heard him make after he was through wrestling, when he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. But when he was Ultimate Warrior, he wasn't very good on the mic. You see what I'm saying?
Yep. Very, very true. And one point I forgot to make, as we were talking about, obviously USWA and World Class, was the influence of the AWA. Did they come to you and want to team up? Was that another instance where they were losing money and they needed somebody to pick them up too?
Yes. And what happened? I had sent a kid named Mike Shields up to help Burn because we were doing great business with them with the wrestling videos. I had seen the success on MTV, and I said, I can do that in the wrestling. So Mike was a good production man, television. So I sent him up there and had Mike break in his replacement down here. So anyway, Mike called me one day and said, I think Vern's going to close this. You ought to come up here and look at it. There's a lot of money that can be done. So I had several conversations with Vern, and he said, yeah, come on up. So when I did, he asked for $4 million for his company. Well, it wasn't worth that. It wasn't worth the business. But the synergy between Dallas, Tennessee territory, and there, I thought would help all three. So we made a deal. But then, right the day before we were supposed to go to his lawyer's office to sign the deal, he said, I thought last night, and I can't leave Greg out because I said, well, then give him the damn money, Vern. And he said, no, I can't do this deal. He wants to be in the wrestling business. I can't do this deal if you don't make him Booker and keep him as a top talent. And I said, I'm not going to do that. Goodbye. I came back to Nashville. And I don't know, Vern folded up a year or two after that.
Yeah, he definitely did.
Maybe that year, I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny, the most memorable part of that whole thing was pretty much Jerry Lawler beating Kurt Hennig, for the strap for the AWA title. That was like the big memory, if you will, of that whole conglomeration, that whole little feud there.
Yeah. Kurt was one of the other great people in this business. I really love Kurt.
Now, as I start to wind it down here a little bit, I was just curious about your wrestling career in itself. Do you have a favorite match, or maybe matches that you look back upon that you really loved when you were involved with wrestling in the wrestling business?
That I was personally in?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably in Memphis. I did a hair match and I lost my hair and they shaved. That stands out because everybody, when I got in the dressing room, said, boy, you did a hell of a job. It looked like you were really crying. And I said, well, I really was. I was just so overcome with emotion that, 10,000 people were screaming, and, that's a real kick. The greatest match, the most emotional, Jack Briscoe was Eddie Grant's, and he was my best friend in the promotion end. Jack Briscoe was his man, and Jerry Lawler was mine. And Lawler and Briscoe had a match in Memphis that still, to me, is the greatest match I've ever seen since I've been in business. And Eddie Grant and I both stood at the back of the Mid-South Coliseum and got emotional and cried watching it. It was just incredible.
Did you have a favorite opponent in your career that you wrestled?
No, not really. My wrestling personally in the ring never captured my passion. I did. because I needed to. But
Gotcha.
my real passion was in the promotion.
What was your favorite part in Memphis? Your favorite, promotional angle, your favorite as a booker? What was your favorite feud to book? I know there's so many to name. I mean, we were talking about a bunch before: Lawler Idol, Lawler Funk, Lawler Dundee, Lawler Valiant, Lawler Kaufman. I mean, the list goes on and on forever. But do you have a favorite, booking moment, if you will, from Memphis?
Yes. The Tupelo concession stand match. You ever heard of that?
No. What is that?
A team called the Moondogs. Lawler, they absolutely destroyed half of Tupelo Arena on all of the concession stands. Most brutal match I've ever seen, and drew money for a solid year after that one match. You might be able to get it on YouTube, or at least clips of it. See, I had a program that climaxed with that match, Briscoe Lawler, and it was called Quest for the Title. And that program lasted one solid year. And I brought in everybody. The Sheik, Dick the Bruiser, Wilbur Steiner, 2 or 3 world champions, Dory Funk, Terry Funk, Andre the Giant. I brought everybody in to wrestle Lawler. And it was a very simple program. It was his quest for the title. And, every week we'd say, well, the NWA says in order to get that title match with Briscoe, he's got to get some more wins under his belt. So I'm bringing in the Iron Sheik. Not the Iron Sheik, the original Sheik. And that was, one of the best programs I ever had, and most successful. Another match that stands out is Terry Garvin was the Fabulous Garvins, and Terry was gay. And I kind of brought him out of the closet, and I said, Terry, why don't you do the Gorgeous George gimmick, wear robes, roll your hair up, and just be the fabulous Terry Garvin. And I said, I think we'll be fine, because half the people thought Gorgeous George was gay. And in Atlanta, when Jim Barnett hired me down there, I brought Blue Fizz in to fight Terry Garvin. And that was one of the great things that I remember. When I went to Atlanta and throwing $2,200, we started. That match sold out. The people 3 deep around the arena, downtown arena. That was, later on I was able to take the wrestling to the Omni, but it started out there. I hate to cut this off, but I'm back at home.